In 1898, the Gulf and Ship Island Railroad finalized plans to expand its northern terminus from Hattiesburg to Jackson, providing rail service to Simpson County for the first time in its 76-year history. Westville, the original county seat since 1824, was positioned 8 miles away from the proposed route, and most residents of the county quickly recognized the need for a new county seat located along the tracks. Philip Didlake, an entrepreneur from Steens Creek, Mississippi, along with his wife and business partner Maud, began purchasing land in northern Simpson County in the fall of 1899 with the idea of establishing a town along the new rail line for that purpose. The Didlakes hired a surveyor, R.A. Bell, and drew up a plat that included a courthouse square and a commercial district, broken up into 12 blocks of between 8 and 16 lots and divided by a main street. The couple named the town Edna after their baby daughter, Edna Earl, and named one of the streets Maud Avenue after their 6-year-old daughter. The Simpson County Board of Supervisors approved the plan, and on March 10, 1900, the state legislature passed a bill allowing the board to hold a voter referendum on the question of whether or not to remove the county seat to a spot along the railroad. The vote was held on May 27th, with Edna being the only choice. The results were 644 for removal of the county seat from Westville and 260 against, with Edna receiving 625 votes as the new location. Philip Didlake tirelessly promoted the new town in newspapers and by word of mouth. He advertised in the Westville News that he would be on site in Edna every Wednesday and Friday to give tours and conduct business. One of the first businesses to relocate was the Westville News, changing its name to the Simpson County News in the process. In July of 1900, the Board of Supervisors purchased a building on Main Street from W.L. Heflin to use as a temporary courthouse and ordered the county records to be moved from Westville to Mendenhall. People and businesses began relocating to Edna from other towns. As it was to be a courthouse town, several attorneys opened practices on Main Street right away. Those included A.W. Dent, R.T. and W.D. Hilton, and P.F. and R.C. Russell. Soon after the records were moved, a lawsuit was filed by Westville resident T.J. Buckley and others, charging that the records were not lawfully and rightfully removed to Mendenhall because the state constitution stipulated that at least 60% of the county's registered voters must vote to move a county seat, and that requirement had not been met in the May vote tally. In the newspaper, Philip Didlake expressed confidence that Edna would prevail in court and proclaimed that those fighting the move were simply whistling past the graveyard. On August 7, 1900, Didlake donated the Edna Courthouse Square to Simpson County for $1. In spring of 1901, the Gulf and Ship Island Railroad rejected the name Edna for its train station because there was already a town in Marion County named Edna. So on May 1, 1901, the town's name was changed to Mendenhall for noted Westville attorney Thomas M. Mendenhall, who had passed away in 1895. The name choice was likely intended as an olive branch to the citizens of Westville in light of the ongoing lawsuit. In 1901, the Mendenhall Baptist Church was formed by a group of 17 people. They were allowed to meet upstairs in the temporary courthouse. In 1903, Maud donated a plot of land to the Mendenhall Baptist Church on the corner of East Street and Pine Avenue. The ladies of the church sold chicken dinners to raise money for building materials, and the church held its first services in the new one-room building on March 12, 1905. The original Methodist congregation met in the Baptist church building until the First Methodist Church building was erected on the northwest corner of Pine Avenue and Northeast Street in 1906. Several new businesses opened in those first years. In 1902, Dr. T. M. Walker, Thomas Mendenhall Walker, also from Steens Creek, opened a drugstore in the spot where McGuffey's Drugs is located today. T.M. Walker was involved in several other startup businesses during this period, including as president of Walker Durr Department Store in 1903, as a member of the board of directors on the Farmers Gin and Manufacturing Company in 1904, and as president of the Mendenhall Bank in 1904. Other early Main Street businesses included H.O. Middleton's Clothing Store, M.C. Heflin's Clothing Store, the People's Drug Store, Crawford and Kilpatrick Shoe Store, Mendenhall Mercantile Dry Goods Store, G.W. Brown's Grocery Store, C.F. Thompson and Company Clothing and Groceries, and W.G. May and Son Grocery Store and Restaurant. In 1903, R.H. Koch, Richard Henry Koch, was appointed the first postmaster of Mendenhall. He would serve in that position for over 20 years. There were two buildings that served as post office during those early years. The first building was damaged by fire in 1907. The second was converted to a store by Mr. Koch after he retired as postmaster in 1925. On March 2, 1903, a judge ruled in favor of the Westville plaintiffs and ordered the county records back to Westville. Mendenhall appealed the ruling, and on March 27, 1905, the Mississippi State Supreme Court upheld the verdict, and the records were returned to Westville on November 10, 1905. A second county referendum was held on July 12, 1906, and this time there was sufficient voter turnout to meet the law's criteria, with 1,041 voting for removal, 405 against. Mendenhall received 937 votes, Pinola received 360, Merritt 85, and Modena 7. In September 1906, the plans for a new courthouse, submitted by New Orleans architect A.J. Bryan, were approved, and on December 4th, the contract for construction was awarded to M.W. Land of Jackson for the sum of $59,000. As construction began on the new courthouse, the Board of Supervisors decided to keep the county records in Westville until the completed courthouse was ready to receive them. That decision would prove to be a fateful one. On March 14th, the old temporary courthouse was rented to the Masonic Lodge for the rest of the year. On May 11, 1907, folks traveled to Mendenhall for a day of celebration to mark the laying of the cornerstone. The Simpson County News reported a gala event with music, barbecue, and political speeches. The paper published an extended account of the 7-year saga that had just reached an end. The writer struck an optimistic tone, calling for unity in the county with hopes for a bright future. But 4 weeks later, on June 17th, the citizens of Mendenhall were stirred from their beds at 2:15 a.m. by the fire bell to find much of Main Street ablaze. The Simpson County News reported that on arriving at the scene, it was discovered that the building occupied by W.G. May and Son as a grocery and restaurant was on fire and that the entire portion of the town was doomed. And in an hour from the time the alarm was given, the entire portion of town from M.C. Heflin's store to the railroad on each side of Main Street, with the exception of Walker's Drug Store, was a mass of moldering ruins. According to the article, arson was suspected, but no suspects were named and the matter was dropped eventually. The devastating fire was a setback for the town, but within a year, several businesses had rebuilt and new ones would open their doors. One business that did not fare well after the fire was the Mendenhall Bank. How the loss of so much income contributed to the bank's decision to sell out is not known, but approximately 14 months after the fire, a new bank moved into the Mendenhall Bank's building. 3 businessmen, Sidney L. McLaurin of Brandon, D.J. Slinker of Vicksburg, and R.L. McLaurin, also of Vicksburg, were listed as the incorporators of People's Bank on September 10, 1908. The only person involved with both the Mendenhall Bank and the newly formed People's Bank was the head cashier, A.S. Davis. Archie Davis would continue on as head cashier for People's Bank, working there until he passed away in March of 1928 at the age of 52. 3 of his children, Alice, Sidney, and Edward, would rise to positions of leadership within the bank, and the Davis family's connection to People's Bank continues on to this day. In October of 1910, the Simpson County News reported that a delegation of Mendenhall citizens went before the Railroad Commission in Jackson Tuesday and presented a petition from the citizens of Mendenhall asking that the Gulf and Ship Island Railroad be required to either build a new depot at this place or remodel the present building so as to make its accommodation ample for the present needs. The Commission, after hearing the plea of our citizens, passed an order by a unanimous vote requiring the railroad company to enlarge and improve the present building to meet the requirements of the patrons of the road. The new station must be modern, with all sanitary appliances, and with sufficient room to accommodate the passenger traffic. By 1911, the Gulf and Ship Island Railroad had 7 passenger trains per day leaving Mendenhall, 4 north-south trains traveling from Jackson to Gulfport, 2 east-west trains traveling from Mendenhall to Columbia, and 1 train headed to Laurel. In May of 1911, construction began on the Simpson County Agricultural High School on 40 acres of donated land at the top of North Main Street, where the current elementary school is located. In addition to the school building, 2 dormitories were built, 1 for girls and 1 for boys, each with 18 rooms. And in 1911, the Cumberland Telephone and Telegraph Company began promoting telephone service in Mendenhall. The first person to have a phone installed was Dr. T.M. Walker, who had a line installed in his drugstore and his home. New businesses in the 1910s included Mrs. J.L. Kaufman's Millinery, which opened in 1912, offering a wide selection of fine ladies' hats. Elliott Brothers, which sold a variety of products from groceries to household goods, and at Christmas time carried such products as toys, sweets, and fireworks. Mendenhall Market, managed by W.M. McCraw, which sold all kinds of meats, groceries, and fruits. It was located in the Middleton Brick Building on the corner across from the courthouse, where the Jitney Jungle would open in the 1920s. The Mendenhall Auto Company opened for business in 1914 across from the bank, selling Ford Model Ts starting at $345. J.J. Kaufman's, selling dry goods, notions, clothing, hats, and shoes. T.F. Cross, which sold all manner of farm implements. D.C. Hall opened the first cleaners, advertising clothes cleaned and pressed on a steam pressing machine. Other businesses included the Union Mercantile Company, which opened in 1917 as a partnership of R.E. Gullidge, W.B. Waldrop, and H.O. Middleton. And Service Drug Store, which is still in business today, first opened its doors in 1919. During World War I, many Mendenhall merchants promoted the sale of the war savings stamps to aid in the war effort. And in July of 1919, the mayor and the Board of Aldermen voted to have paved sidewalks constructed on either side of Main Street down to the railroad tracks. There were several hotels that came and went in those early days, including the Eureka Home, the Guyton Hotel, also known as the Drummers Hotel, and one owned by Philip Didlake. At least 2 of these hotels burned for various reasons, but in 1915, a man named Frank Heil from Texas, by way of Saratoga, purchased a plot of land just south of the railroad for the purpose of building a hotel. And because he wanted it to have its own restaurant, he constructed 3 large Lazy Susan tables with rotating centers that would allow diners to help themselves to the many dishes of traditional Southern foods placed in the middle of the tables. The Heil Hotel proved popular with travelers and locals alike and would gain worldwide notoriety after being renamed the Mendenhall Hotel and Revolving Tables Restaurant. When the first car dealership opened for business in Mendenhall in 1914, paved roads in America were almost non-existent, and with no federal or state-level highway building programs, cars depended on local farm roads, winding, rutted trails that were impossible to traverse when it rained. So in spring of 1915, when automotive magnate Carl Fisher announced plans to build a highway from Detroit to Miami, local officials throughout the South began charting the best route through their states for possible inclusion in the proposed Dixie Highway. Some Gulf Coast businessmen decided to follow the Gulf and Ship Island Railroad from Gulfport to Jackson in a touring car in early 1915 and submitted the proposed route at the Dixie Highway Convention in May of that year. Although the Dixie Highway Association chose to go through Georgia instead of Mississippi, the Gulf Coast Highway Association's publicity campaign had been so effective that for the next 10 years, South Mississippians believed that their route was indeed part of the Dixie Highway. Signage marked as Dixie Highway Gulf Coast Route remained in place in Simpson County until 1924, when the Dixie Highway Association demanded that the signs in Mississippi be taken down. In Mendenhall, Teapot Road and Dixie Avenue were part of that original route, which was renamed Highway 49 in 1927. That highway, rerouted in the 1930s and again in the 1960s, continues to shape the future of Mendenhall a century later. It would also help end passenger train service in Mendenhall in the 1950s.